How are we doing, everybody? Hope you're having a wonderful time in the UK at the moment. It is absolutely shiny, it's sunshine. We haven't seen sunshine in about 100 years. 100 years ago, do you have sunglasses? I can't remember, I wasn't born there. At least I don't think I was. Questions. For today's video, I thought to go over actually quite a very common mosasaur species that's found in the Moroccan phosphates, and it's this fella here, what I call the jaws of all trades, Eremiasaurus. So, apart from this fantastic image here, what is an Eremiasaurus? So, like I said, Eremiasaurus is a type of mosasaur that's actually been found in the phosphates of Morocco, dating from around about 68 to 66 million years ago. However, new discoveries probably push that back a bit further. If some of you are quite privy, you will have actually noticed that I covered another species of Eremiasaurus in another video back just before the end of last year. And it was in Moore's dissertation from 2024 where Moore actually describes Lyodon mosasauroides as a new species of Eremiasaurus dating from France and dating a bit earlier than the Moroccan species Eremiasaurus heterodontus. So Eremiasaurus heterodontus and Eremiasaurus mosasauroides were possibly part of either Mosasaurini or the Prognathodontini. There's still a bit of about the phylogeny of those two. At the moment we think they're more Prognathodontini, which has some interesting implications about Prognathodontini evolution, but for now, So Eremiasaurus is generally characterised as having quite a robust-ish kind of skull and has a body length of about maybe 5, maybe 6 meters in length. But the main characteristic that it's known for, particularly in the type species Eremiasaurus heterodontus, is its heterodont teeth. So, what do I mean by heterodonty? Well, heterodonty is basically the condition where your jaws actually contain several different types of teeth. Usually, for most animals, it's between 1 to maybe occasionally a third tooth, and Eremiasaurus seems to have about 3 different tooth types. It's really hard to say that, isn't it? Tooth type, especially for Yorkshiremen. Tooth type. I'm just gonna get on with the video. So the very front teeth were very conical and slender, and the cutting edge on the front, or the carinae, was actually serrated, so that meant it was a lot more effective at cutting, and the enamel on these teeth were very smooth as well. In fact, the very front teeth have a unique adaptation. They actually have what's called the interdigitate pits. Basically, they're pits on the jaws that accommodate the tooth tips of the adjacent teeth. So when this animal actually shut its jaws, the jaws would have shut together a lot more tightly than in other mosasaurs. And yes, while some of the mosasaurs do have these pits in particular, they're very prominent in Eremiasaurus, particularly Eremiasaurus heterodontus. Now, the middle teeth were a bit stockier and a bit more blade-like, and in fact their cutting edges, or the carinae, as I mentioned before, they were both serrated, so they were quite effective cutting tools, and these teeth occasionally bear very faint facets. In fact, in some specimens they are somewhat prominent, but this varies from individual to individual, so it's an individual variation aspect. Now, the back teeth in the top jaw are very, very similar to the middle teeth. They seem to be a bit more squat, a bit more stout, while the back teeth in the bottom jaw are a bit more bulbous. They almost look a little akin to prognathodon teeth, so maybe there was a bit of crushing, a bit of slicing going on in this animal, particularly towards the back of the jaw, where the jaw would have been most powerful. And this variability in the jaws of Eremiasaurus, particularly Eremiasaurus heterodontus, meant that this animal really was a jaw of all trades. This animal was going after a whole variety of different prey items. Now, the rest of the skeleton in Eremiasaurus, apart from, the head part, with all the nasty teeth that could slice you up, that was quite unique. Particularly with the paddles, or basically the flippers in mosasaurs, and the tail. So in the paper that described it, LeBlanc et al. 2012, Eremiasaurus seems to have a paddle morphology, it's very, very strange how to describe, but basically from the shoulder, it's very Cladastes-like, so a very fast-moving, swimming mosasaur, and then from the forearm down, you have sort of a more Mosasaurus, Plotosaurus type morphology, so it's almost like the shoulder is small mosasaur, and then the rest of the paddle is big mosasaur. It's very, very strange. It's like having hands as big as your torso, in a way. Yeah, that's the best way to describe it. Yeah. I'm going mental over mosasaurs. Just to be clear, in this photo, I am not actually the tail fluke of an Eremiasaurus. I'm actually human. I don't know how that happened, but some people think it might. Now, Eremiasaurus shares a very similar tail morphology to a much larger mosasaur, a mosasaurine called Plotosaurus, which looked pretty much almost like a mosasaur that was mimicking an ichthyosaur. In fact, I like to call it the ichthyosaur mimicking mosasaur. But this similar tail morphology actually made Eremiasaurus a very fast swimmer, so this meant that this animal could chase after a whole variety of fast prey, including fish, plesiosaurs, and other mosasaurs potentially. And Eremiasaurus, particularly Eremiasaurus heterodontus, needed all these adaptations because it shared an environment with a whole host of other mosasaurs, including Mosasaurus, Haenosaurus, Prognathodon, Thalassatitan, the list goes on and on and on, so this animal had some real competition, particularly in Morocco. And these adaptations would have actually made Eremiasaurus a very adaptable generalist, and this animal probably would have preyed on fish, small mosasaurs, plesiosaurs. It could have also feasted on some maybe hard-shell prey, maybe like ammonites and maybe crustaceans. This animal really was a jack of all, or I should say a jaw of all trades. This animal was really adaptable. Now, the main difference between the two species of Eremiasaurus that are soon to be recognised is that Eremiasaurus heterodontus has more prominent heterodont teeth than those in Eremiasaurus mosasauroides. Now, since this is a bit of speculation, but since Mosasauroides lived earlier than Heterodontus, I suspect that Heterodontus is a descendant of Mosasauroides. And because Eremiasaurus mosasauroides actually had less heterodont teeth, this probably meant that this animal was actually more susceptible to competition from other mosasaurs and wasn't able to adapt to new mosasaurs entering that environment, and therefore may have gone extinct in France, and maybe some of the descendants evolved into Eremiasaurus heterodontus. We don't know, we need more fossils. Now, another bit of speculation that I've actually speculated on before in other videos is that the African species of Prognathodon cyander, yeah, it's one of those, it's a Prognathodon situation. I actually believe that that species is possibly a species of Eremiasaurus that lived in Angola around the same time as Heterodontus, but maybe the paleogeography or even niche partitioning may have kept them apart from each other. But this is very heavy speculation based on a few papers and a few observations, so nothing's concrete, so I could be completely wrong in the future, and yeah, I might be. Now, a little fun fact about Eremiasaurus before I end this video is that we actually have evidence that Eremiasaurus, particularly Eremiasaurus heterodontus, occasionally fell victim to other mosasaurs. Longrich et al. 2022, which is the paper that describes Thalassatitan, actually describes a specimen of Eremiasaurus that looks to have had acid etching on it, and that means that this poor animal was inside the belly of a much larger animal and being digested. And it looks like the only thing that probably would have done that is Thalassatitan. So imagine a 10-meter long mosasaur eating what was a much smaller Eremiasaurus. This animal probably wasn't fully grown when it died. But yeah, not a nice way to go, is it? You weren't that adaptable, were you? No, you couldn't adapt your way out of some giant animal's belly, could you? No, I didn't think so. Poor old Eremiasaurus. But yeah, Eremiasaurus, a very common and pretty much overlooked mosasaur. I'm really looking forward to more research coming out about this animal. And yeah, if you've got a mosasaur tooth from Morocco in your collection, it's most likely from this fella. Alright guys, have a good day. I'll see you later. Ta-ta. Bye.